Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Community at the Practitioner's Table. And last week, I miss Kim. Real quick, I miss Kim. Last week, we talked about what yoga is. What was yoga? What is yoga? And we reflected on our own experiences of yoga and how maybe it's changed and shifted throughout our life. And that kind of prompted quite a few questions. But today, I was thinking about what is the science of yoga? Miss Kim, you've talked about the science of yoga on and off throughout this podcast and on and off throughout our relationship, that it's always been kind of not a mystery, but just something I've wanted to know more about. When I think science of yoga, I think anatomy and body, but I also know there's more to it. And also, too, is this something specifically just in Ashtanga yoga, or is it something that can be applied to other forms of yoga? Is another question I had. So, anyways, that's what we're talking about.
I have to put that out there. 2 questions. So, does it apply to other forms of yoga outside of the Ashtanga system? And what is the science of yoga?
Yeah, that's what we got today.
Gosh. Whew, nothing to finish in 40 minutes, that's for sure.
We can just pick one to go with.
Yeah, and then I think just like it takes anybody a lot of practice to make perfect, or like we spin around on the karmic wheel until we learn the lesson, or we have these reoccurring thoughts until we help ourselves, or we have a certain diet until we shift that. Like, this conversation will come up again and again and again and again throughout our existence, because that's the beauty of it, right? And part of us want to put our thumb on life and say we have it all figured out, and then what? Like, retire, rest back on our laurels. So the question that you're asking is a lifelong question, and I think there are important foundational points and pieces of information, because that is science. And then also our bodies, right? Our life is a big science experience. And so we have to embody it and learn from it. And so the question came from our conversation before the video started. So it's more of like, you were sharing with me how you had been approaching the traditional series, or like there is a sequence in yoga that came from, so everything comes from the top of the pyramid, so to speak, and there are these pioneers of yoga, and they created a system, and it was very profound. And then as it grew, it sort of spread out, and we have different types of yoga and different versions because people are different, and maybe this one method was the doorway, but then it kind of expanded and grew. But the method was also scientific and philosophical. And so the rule, the foundations, right, they sort of, because they came from up here and they trickle down, and sometimes they get lost. And then we have to go back up to the top and take the information again, and then we get lost. So the universal truths, or the foundations of yoga, are like the middle line, and it's classic normal humanity that we would veer away from the middle line and kind of lose our way and come back, right? And so what you were saying is literally, for the people that are listening, Jessie asked me, she's like, so what is the science, Kim? Like, I've been doing some asana, which are all these postures, and we've been forward folding, and I'm following this sequence, and I'm using my tools and the videos and the things I can to stay interested in this sort of entrance into yoga. And then I turned around and asked you, well, where were your eyes? Where were your eyes during the practice? And how were you breathing during the practice? Because scientifically, you are able to access it through the musculature, the skeletons, and all those. But like, what was happening with the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight, or the rest and digest part of ourselves? Were you breathing calmly and it was allowing you to feel a form of expansion? Or were you doing what we all do, is actually be in the postures, but part of ourselves are like disassociated from our experience, right? Because we're in our heads, or we're over here. And so we're all like lucky enough to have to experience that, right? And so that's common on the path, is to be like, where is the science? I lost it. What's going on here? And also then I want to reiterate to you, it's like, okay, sure, the cosmic joke is that we go in through these asana postures and we're holding our arms in a certain way and we're doing these things. Sure. But also I'm focused my gaze to calm my eye sockets so that my eye sockets can relay a sense of sensory information to the brain, and the brain goes, oh, the eyes are calm. Oh, they're still calm. Ooh, they're calm, and I'm feeling this unwinding of breath. Well, I'm going to send some signals to my body, to the spindles of my nervous system that connect these synapses that shove like energy across portals, because at the end of the nervous system, they are not connected. The actual electricity jumps from one node to the other. Okay, that's kind of magical right there. And we want to get in touch with that stuff. So we lengthen our breath. We take a breath that helps the nervous system expand, and I calm my eye gaze so I can involute my senses and have a different experience. Is it every time? No, right? Is every day the same? No. And just like you experienced, you will come in and we'll circle around on a certain level or a certain floor. And then you just asked a really poignant and beautiful question. Where's the science? I'm like, well, it's right there. But there's also more science over here that you can come and grab. Eye gaze, clear ujjayi, deep breathing. And then you might level up a little further in your practice. And I'll also, divulge what I said to you in answering the question. I said, I do it too. That's why I keep going to the mat, is because when I do have those days where the eye gaze and the breath and the body is firing, I'm on top of the world. Everything has come together for me. I realize the efforts are being rewarded. I have a different experience, and then that helps me come back. Is the next day the same? No, we're not the same person. But I can take that experience and be like, okay, let's see if I can reach out and hold all three of these foundational tools together again. And that's why most of us call it a yoga practice, not a yoga perfect, right? It's not perfection. It's a practice. It's a lifelong excavation. It's a lifestyle. So yeah, that's where the science lies, in the experimentation, right? We have to go back to the hypothesis and retest the hypothesis and see what we can extract from it, or see what we're doing right or wrong, or correct method or incorrect method, because you're looking for a particular result and each person's going to look for a different result. But if you're on that sort of body, mind, spirit path of yoga, then you're going to want all three of those things involved in your practice as much as possible. And again, it's a practice, it's not a perfect. But when you begin to experience a little bit of what the other two foundations, right? You have the postures, you have the breath, and you have the eyes. I think you begin to really understand what's happening on the inside rather than what's happening on the outside.
Right. Juicy. That's awesome. No, that's, yeah, perfect, right? And I know that my eyes wander still. And if my eyes are wandering, sometimes, most of the time, my breath is not expansive. And then I bring it back. Like I'm doing that when I find my downward dog and those sun A's or those sun B's that I'm holding for 5 breaths. I'm like, yeah, not really paying attention. My mind is wandering somewhere else. There are days where I have to put my dog in his crate because I'm just like hearing him slobber all over his toys. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really annoying. Can we stop? And then I'm like, hey, stop, But he's a dog. He doesn't want to. So it is a thing. And I think for a while, I knew that, the science did have to do with the nervous system and how like the drishti, the breath, and the posture all affect that. I think I knew that somewhere, but I think it's just not something that I quite have embodied or experienced very often. So there is kind of that disconnect for me. You know what I'm saying? Like not really getting it. Like the science of yoga. How does that even work? Have I done it before? I don't know, you know? So I thought your explanation.
I think that also there was a two-part question, right? So how does it fit into the other methods? Before we go into the how does it fit in the other methods, the last thing I wanted to say was music. This is a perfect example. Is everybody wants a distracting piece. And so remember when we were in our hometown and it was like, this is traditional Ashtanga primary series that came from this one thing that was developed, and I happen to like it and I want to offer it. And yeah, there's no music involved. People are like, oh, I can't do that. And it's like, yeah. And the clients that I have, like, they need some sort of background noise. And so again, it's that, like, can we just be with what it is with no music, just the sound of our voice? I do agree, you know, part of the original lineage was to do it early in the morning or at the end of your day, because it's quiet. It's quiet. Your mind is quiet. The field is quiet. So there is some benefits to being willing to let one particular system show you what it has to offer. And in some of that offering might be you having to be broken down a little. And maybe we're in the era where it's just so uncomfortably broken down that, you know, part of the colonial system that did break down the people was unhealthy. And so now we're going to put that across everything in life, that everything is unhealthy if you make me shift or refine who I am, because God forbid I need refinement.
Ooh, now we're in it. Because
Mm-hmm.
you're right. I mean, I think once I started practicing with you in that class and started learning more about the Ashtanga lineage, I didn't even want to offer music in my own classes. I don't. And if I did, it was usually just mantra, like people chanting mantra and stuff. And I don't practice with music. I cannot stand it. And I'll go to studios and they'll play music, and I'm like, I really can't hear my thoughts. And that's the point, right? And it is this thing. That's where I was going to go with that is when I'm sitting in a down dog and I'm taking the breaths and my eyes are wandering and then my mind wanders, what am I thinking about? That is like the gateway into my brain, right? Like I'm learning so much about where my thoughts, oh, I'm sitting in this posture. I have 5 breaths, which can be anywhere from 20 seconds to like 60 seconds. And what is the first thing that pops into my mind? Am I anxious about something? Am I excited about something? Am I worried about what I'm doing next? Am I not present in this moment? Why? So it's like all of these things. I think maybe there's just lack of connection or point. Like not everybody can fully understand or has been told that we don't practice with music because we're getting to learn the contents of our mind, our personality complex. Like if you can't be present for 5 breaths, like, what does that say about you?
Well, or without judgment, right?
Yeah,
Without judgment, let's
of course.
take harvest of our experience and how we feel about that. If some people are okay with that, great. But what this podcast, kind of your idea around this podcast, was supposed to offer something to the people that weren't okay with that. It's like, I really want this thing that I can't get to and I'm confused. To all of those who are fine and don't need it, that's great. It is of no business for us, right?
Yeah.
But to the people that are curious and maybe their soul knows underneath it that there's something available to them, but they're too scared to approach it or whatever emotion gets in the way, this is for those people, right? And let me backtrack again. And we keep throwing the word Ashtanga out there, and it's
Yeah.
the same thing with like yoga. What's vinyasa? That this we're using words from another language. So of course it's not going to make sense to you in English, but don't let that stand in the way of like the general concept of what we're sharing. Ashtau, it means the number 8. Ashtanga, 8, and then ang is limb. So we're teaching a language here. We're learning to embrace like another culture, another language. It doesn't mean that it's not for us. It just means that in America or in the classic Western traditions, we don't get access to a lot of other languages. We see it, but English is the global language. So we think that we get to rest back on our laurels and not take in anything other than this culture. I projected an opinion. Okay, that's not what everybody is feeling, but that's one angle of it.
Yeah.
So Ashtanga is just an 8-limbed practice. It has 8 bullet points to it. And most of what we're talking about is the third one, where we go in and take these yogic postures. But before it, we have these beautiful tenets of yoga, like the 10 commandments of how to be off the mat, which is essentially where we're headed today.
Mm-hmm.
But also we're in the point of like talking about the science of yoga, because we have to go around and around and around and around and around and around until we get the wisdom of experience of going around and around and around and around, right? Just like we talk about with the decades of our lives. I mean, only now at 50, I've gone through enough morphism of my human experience to be like, oh, I think I have a little wisdom now, right? And you at 30 are like, okay, I can look back at my 20s. I went around and around and around and around. So these conversations are common and they're very needed in this practice, just like in any other groups. People will take, counsel. We're counseling right now. We're talking about it. We're spinning it around. We're looking at the different sides of the gem of this concept of yoga. So yeah. And so going back to the second part of the question, how does Ashtanga yoga fit into other yogic styles? It's still the same. This is the Tristana, 3 Tristana, right? The breath, the eye gaze, and the posture goes through all of them. So all yogic classes, whether it's the Bikram Hot 26, that's how I made it through the Bikram Hot 26 when there are mirrors. I was like, oh shit, keep my eye gaze. Oh, excuse me. Keep my eye gaze in one spot. Don't look in the mirror. You'll get used to the mirror over time. But really, I already had the foundations of the science of yoga to come from. So it was like, okay, feel, whatever my teachers taught me beforehand to get there. And the eye gaze was on my nose or on the mat. I wasn't worried about how flexible other people are. I knew that yoga was an inside job and really about the involution of my senses and not abandoning myself and looking out, not abandoning myself and listening to the music, even though that was fun too. I found it to be very manic and distracting for me for a long time until I was able to weave in, right, some more maturity there. I'm like, can I practice with all this music? Can I get through a mirror and not judge myself, And that's when I leveled up on my yoga practice, when I took those 3 tools and was able to put them in front of a mirror or put them amongst music. But really, the benefits of the science do come, like you said, without music, without distractions. And so we don't have that liberty this day and age. So a lot of this gets lost. But if we can, and we're willing enough to go through the experience, we are gifted with the little like intricacies, the little like sparks of like, whoa, what was that? What did I feel? Or whoa, did I just like go into a place that wasn't my thoughts? Did I just get an impression or a vision of the world being a better place and how I could make it a better place? Oh, did I? Because really it's a moving meditation. And returning back to any sequence, a sequence, some sequence allows us to not worry about what we're going to do in the postures, but the postures are set up for us to actually focus on the gaze and focus on the breath. That's why a system or a method over the course of time not only opens up the body and the tissues, but it also gives us access into the science.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as you're saying that specifically, it's like, that's why we take this set sequence. It's the same every time because our body gets used to it. Like, we know what's coming next. So then we can be like, where's my eye gaze? How is my breath? Am I present in time? Like our body, the musculature knows to expect what's coming. So that way we can meditate while we move and just do the thing.
Yeah.
I think I think that's why I like it too. I mean, there's a little bit of comfort in it for me because I know what's coming. But I like that I know it's the same stuff, the same set of postures every time. So I can do the science. I can work on this stuff and be shown things or about myself or the world or whatever, you know? So
I have again, those clients come up again, it's like, we create fun weekend. We can't wait to see you on Monday. We're looking forward to the practice. Take it easy on me. And I thought, that's so beautiful that, they're even, anybody would still be willing to say, we're excited to see you, but take it easy on me. Did I take it easy on them? No. But what I did is, really allow the individual to come into the practice in their most like comfortable way. Like we were standing, I'm like, looks to me like we better come into the practice standing. Just step onto your mat and take what's comfortable for you, right? And so once I got them to get that gaze and the breath, and I could feel the field shift of safety and comfort, then we could access whatever we wanted. And we ended up doing more than we ever expected. Additionally, that person, one of the two, was like, oh, my back, oh, this pain, XYZ pain, I've got this thing going on. And all I had to do is know enough about the breath and the drishti to get that pain, right? The whatever was going on, it was like, just take your arm up. But really what I want you to do is just soften the gaze, touch your heart, however it was, to bring in the breath and the eye gaze. And next thing you know, the body just naturally opened up and they were able to access a lot more than they expected. And then it was like getting that reflection in. So how do you feel? Does your back still feel the same? How was it? Did you even notice that it was painful at all? No, because we didn't really focus in on the resistance. We actually focused in on the science.
yes. Yes. As you're telling this story, I'm like, every time I'm in a forward fold now, just staying at the top of my mat, I linger and I take a few conscious breaths, and my eye gaze is like at my nose or up towards my belly button. My back lengthens. It hurts. It does, because I'm not doing the same amount of physical activity I was doing just last year. I'm doing a lot of sitting. So it's like rounding my back and stuff. So it's uncomfortable. But with every breath, my back lengthens, and the inch before the inch that it lengthens to doesn't hurt anymore. Like things are opening, That's real. That's the science, you know?
And I think also, so I could say maybe 5 years, I had the same sort of physical pain, I kept approaching my practice with intelligence and compassion and intellect the best I could on the days that I could, and knowing that it was going to be a relationship. And then one day I'm like, I don't think that hurt anymore. But how far are we willing to go? How committed are we willing to go? Then there have been years where I grinded in and grinded in and grinded in and created injury. So my path and such is a big mix of all of that. It's not always going to be in one direction of like, oh, look at the Lululemon picture, it was so easy. No, if you talk to most of those people, they all have gone through injuries too. But what they did is connect themselves with practitioners or people that understood what they're going through, so that they could hold them in and like feel supported as they were willing to like work through injury. And so my client is beginning to realize that actually it doesn't take much, but it will take the commitment. It will take the commitment and the intellect to know that I actually have to go right through into the pain, kind of, sort of, meaning like I don't get to avoid yoga just because my back hurts. Actually, the yoga will actually help my back. I just need the right approach. I need the right intellect. Oh, I take it easy. Okay, the cat cows help me open up my back. Okay, what's after that? Oh, actually, I like to go into downward facing dog. Great, we're creating an authentic practice for you. We're creating your yoga with the Tristana. We're saying we're going to take the posture, the breath, and the drishti, but you're going to create it for your body and your injury and your back. No, you don't get to do all the easy postures. Actually, you're going to have to like come up right up to the edge of the fire. That's also part of the philosophy, right? We actually do have to come into the juicy stuff sometimes, probably all the time daily, right? Doesn't need to be the whole entire practice, but you do have to kind of come in and take, you're gonna have to pull from the buffet of yoga, right? You got to take your drishti, you got to take the breath, you got to take the posture, you got to take the philosophy, meaning like you are going to edge up right on the parts that you want to avoid. Oh, you get to take the safety parts, like, oh no, too much, you know, like, oh, is this hurting you? Then we'll find a posture that works for you. But most people, we will need to do this in community. And yeah, we do have to take lecture. Did you know that in the most intense aspects of India and yoga, you take lecture afterwards, or you find a community that you can learn from that will talk about all the other parts, so that when you go back to just you yoga and you're alone, you've had enough of all these other parts of the wheel to understand the buffet, right? And you say, okay, so yeah, it's like really easy, and it's like really a lot too. So it's cool for the beginner to know that. You know, that's why this podcast that you have here is really beautiful, because it allows, at least puts into the ethos, casual conversations like this for people, so that when they come into the room, they'll be like, oh wow, that podcast actually taught me more than the Western yoga class. Actually, I'm going to go back to the podcast and I'm going to send him an email, and I'm actually going to take a step further and say, can I get some support? Oh, what city are you in? Oh, we'll look up what we know and point you in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, right? And I was thinking while you were saying everything too, it's like, you're absolutely right. That's why it's important to have community. That's why it's important to know these things, because I think even for those who are just taking a vinyasa class, not like just taking a vinyasa class, but taking a vinyasa class or taking, a hatha class or whatever it is, right? And they don't get the Tristana, like no one's talking about it. My train of thought just left. I'm so bummed out right now. Yeah, that's a wild. Wow.
That's what happens when a flood of like really inspirational thoughts come in, right? You kind of lose your.
So many. Oh my goodness.
How does yoga come off the mat as well from this point? How do we say that this podcast is worth people doing yoga so that they can take their yoga off the mat? It's like, what does that mean, right?
How many times have I heard that? And I'm like, well, I'm not doing forward folds out the door into my car, into my house.
I can give you one little example, is like,
go for it.
I would say out here in Florida, I have not had anybody give me the bird. Where in California, if you're driving, right, you get the bird a lot, or you get like honk honk. Like there's not a lot of that out here. Like it's a little bit, for what it's worth. My experience has been, because I'm from California and I'm a crazy driver, meaning like I'm an athletic driver. I could totally get around all the traffic here easily, right? But I try not to do that, because then that puts me out to be the sore thumb and I'm the crazy driver. But I would say that's a perfect example, is like when somebody's a jerk on the road, do I lose my auric space, my happy bubble, and actually literally lose energy to them and engage in that like crappy experience? Or can I recognize that I've been triggered, and like the opportunity is there for me to use my yogic tools? I'm like, oh, do I take my gaze outward and my breath and my energy? Or do I go, wow, that was a triggering moment. I can recognize how I lose my space in yoga as well. Oh, my breathing's off. Oh, my eye gaze is off. I'm like, oh no, actually just focus to what you were doing. Hold on to the wheel, take some nice breaths, and recalibrate my nervous system, recall my energy back to me. And then for me, on the philosophical level, I actually need to say a prayer and actually like bless that person that's not in the space that I'm in and is probably in a horrible nervous system experience, and be like, okay, I'm going to give that up and I'm going to say a prayer because that's my philosophy in life and where I want to be. So yoga allows me to go off the mat, and whatever happens, I get triggered, somebody said something offensive to me, right? Well, I can at least come back to my involuted experience where I'm systematically understanding my life, my body, my experience, and I'm going to use those tools so that I can continue to be the blessing that I wish to be in the world, right?
Yeah.
Be the change that you wish to be. You know, I am the one I am waiting for. All of those amazing things come back into play. And that's how I take the yoga off the mat. Is it perfect? No. Is every practice perfect? No. Is every day perfect? No. Do some days I really nail it? And I'm like, yeah, that was awesome. And I almost get a little attached to my ego. And I'm like, I'm so fucking great. Yeah, that happens too. But I don't necessarily live there very long either. I can come back to some humility and recognize that from what part of myself am I functioning from? Even the visionary eagle.
I love it. I love it. That's such a good anecdote. That's so great, because while you were sharing your experience, you know, mine has very much been being able to drop the ego and receive the assist, the guidance of my mentors. So on the mat, right, what that looks like for me briefly on the mat is when I've been adjusted. I'm like, oh, a shock just went through my body. I don't want the adjustment. I always want adjustments, but you know, my body's like, not today. Or when right, like my mentor, my teacher has seen me, like knows my personality so well on and off the mat, that it's just like I'm being told things like, oh, when you release this, like whatever is going on with you, then your body will be doing the thing. And I'm like, I want it to do the thing now. You don't know what's going on in my life. Da 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 da. And so after years and years, like being able to take that, even instruction, learning how to teach as well, right? Being able to take all those things now off the mat. I've softened, my ego has dropped, and now I can listen to what my mentors and my guides and my elders or my friends, family has for me without taking it personally. And that's like, I'm not taking it personally and just pushing it away, but I'm not taking it personally and being like, how does this apply to my life? What are they seeing that I'm not? Can I be present? Right. So we talk about the teacher student relationship, our community of healers we have surrounded ourselves with, to help us heal and to learn from. And I think that's where my yoga off the mat has come in the last 10 years, really, is how can I drop this ego that I've built up to keep me so safe as a young adult, even a child, and be able to take in the wisdoms and knowledge that my teachers have around me. And doing that when you're in your 20s, please, that's really hard. That's really hard. But through the yogic experience, it's happened. And I'm not always there by any means. When people tell me things, when my mentors and guides tell me things, I'm like, I'm just not going to say anything, because I know my ego is just involved right now, and I'd be arguing and not listening to what people have to say for me, right? I'm not perfect at it. I don't get it right all the time. And just like you, where you send a prayer, I send gratitude. Like, thank you for this. I don't know how what you're saying applies in my life right now, but I know it does, or else it wouldn't be said, you know? So, yeah.
And let's just take this whole conversation and show or give an antidote to the beginning yoga student, which happened to me the other day. Let's just take one leg straight and let's bend the other one and bring it into 90. Right here, this is yoga off and on the mat. So it's like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, that hurts. Oh my God, I can't touch my toes. Who said you could touch your toes right now? I just said, bring a leg in. That's all I said. But they know that they're going to stretch over the long leg. Well, okay, so whether it's the forward fold here, or you're doing the one where you like warrior two, where you bend one leg and one leg is straight and you got to bend into that bent leg and you're like leaning in, and your quadricep, which is my arm right now, is burning. And people are like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. It's like, that actually take a breath, right? The person is like giving you the bird on the road or cut you off. That's the quadricep.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is the driver. This is the asshole on the streets. This is the person that said the wrong word and triggered me. Well, in yoga, it's the burning quadricep, right? And so we take some breaths there. We breathe, we focus the eye gaze so that what's the contents of our mind, they're going, well, that's connected to the eyes too, because you're like, I'm looking around, where can I escape? Right? It's like, actually, no, we're going to use the breath and we're going to calm the eyes. The quadricep is still going to burn, or in your case, your hamstrings are still going to feel like they're going to pop off because that's the contents of my mind, right? I'm going to catastrophize it for like months. But when you start to unwind that, or at least be in the room and allow that person that sees you and says, okay, I'll let you bend your knees. I know your hamstrings are burning, but when you're done, I'm just going to let you know, are they still attached to your legs? Are you okay? And you were like, yeah, I'm okay, but I'm still freaking out on the inside, right? Then you're starting to understand, oh my God, that's my little ego or the part of me that's scared. And so that's where yoga becomes really huge and can like hold you in such a beautiful place, because the beginning practitioner is going to think that their back is going to snap off, you know, or set to bandhasana, where I have to go, I have, you know, on the top of my head, or the thing about the neck, and I got all this neck injury. No one said I had to take full posture. Yoga is like one little page out of the yellow pages a day. And so there, oh, here we go, talking about philosophy. So the science of yoga also works with philosophy. And listen, we can't be in this world and in our bodies without an ego. All we're asking for is a healthy ego.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get rid of mine. That's a good protector. It's a good motivator. It's a good part of me that I need to say that, like, I'm worthy. Because, right, everyone's stories in this world that we come into are different. So it's not about rejecting even, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we want the resistance to come in the room, because it's like, oh, now we can really make change for ourselves, for our community, for our world through yoga. So your hamstrings, like that gratitude around the difficulty in the hamstrings is and continues to be your genius in yoga as well. So
Totally. Well, I feel like we could continue talking about this. This is a very long conversation with a short amount of time. So, but we are at time. And Kim, thank you so much for sharing personal experiences and also bringing in what is the science and how does this apply on and off the mat. I think it's beautiful and
never ending, right?
never ending.
We
So,
just like, we're almost like, we're full in our potluck, but we'll come back to the table, right, for another meal. So that's the beauty of it.
it's awesome. It's awesome. All right, guys, give us your comments and thoughts below. I don't really have a question today, but it's been a pleasure, Miss Kim, and I look forward to seeing you next week and whatever we talk about.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Jessie.
Of course. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.